Hello students, this is the fourth lecture on the nervous system under the series of general anatomy. Now, in last three lectures we have learned that the nervous system can be divided as the central and peripheral nervous system. This was one kind of the classification, but other classification we have learned that nervous system can also be classified as the somatic nervous system, autonomic nervous system, and the enteric nervous system. The somatic nervous system was responsible for the nerve supply to the head, neck, trunk, and the limbs, okay, to the skin, to the skeletal muscle, joints, and tendon. And this nervous system was under our control, okay. Now, but on there is another nervous system which is called as the autonomic nervous system, and it is maintaining the internal environment of our body, which is not under our control. It acts automatically. That is the autonomic nervous system. And this autonomic nervous system regulates the various system of our body for the cardiac, I mean say for the heart rate, okay, the respiration, the digestion, okay. In this way there are many systems which are regulated by the autonomic nervous system. So with this brief introduction of the autonomic nervous system, I come to this lecture, which is just a lecture, a general lecture on the autonomic nervous system, and the next lecture which will follow, where we will talk specifically about the divisions of the autonomic nervous system in details, okay. Now the autonomic nervous system controls and coordinates the internal environment, okay, as I just said to you, okay. They are of two, there are two divisions of the autonomic nervous system: sympathetic division and the parasympathetic division, that you already know. Now both these divisions are complementary to each other. Complementary to each other means sympathetic and parasympathetic. In very simple language, they are having the opposite function, okay, opposite function. That means the most organ of our body receive the nerve supply from both kind of the autonomic divisions, sympathetic as well as the parasympathetic division, okay. And both these divisions have, as I said, opposite action. Just take a very simple example. Stimulation of the sympathetic division, okay, increases the heart rate, okay. The heart rate increases because of the stimulation of sympathetic division. But at the same time, when parasympathetic division is stimulated, it decreases the heart rate. That means the sympathetic and parasympathetic on the heart, they are acting in opposite direction. One is increasing the heart rate and another is decreasing the heart rate. So this is the first lesson about the autonomic nervous system, that there are two divisions and they act opposite to each other. Now, in this autonomic nervous system, which consists of both operant and efferent motor component. In the last lecture, in the, I mean say, formation of a typical spinal nerve, I told you about the operant and efferent component of the visceral nervous system or the autonomic nervous system. And these are under voluntary control, okay. Uh, Autonomic nerve consists of both afferent and efferent motor component. They are not under voluntary control, okay. So both sensory as well as motor component of an autonomic nervous system, they are not under the voluntary control, and they work mostly unconsciously. You cannot have any control on your intestinal action. You cannot have your control on your respiratory rate, okay, or on the function of the lung. Similarly, you cannot control your heart rate. You just can't order your heart to increase the rate or decrease the rate, okay. this has to be automatically regulated, and all these functions which are controlling, which are there of the autonomic nervous system, say for example of sympathetic or parasympathetic division, they are working at unconscious level. You don't know when your heart rate is increasing or weight decreasing, depending on the necessity of this. Okay, it is automatically done, okay, without your knowledge. Okay, so this is not, that means the sensation or the motor functions of the autonomic nervous system, they are not realized by you, they doesn't reach to the level of the consciousness. Now come to the first component of the autonomic nervous system, and it is the motor component. How the autonomic nervous system controls the various visceral system. Okay, various visceral. Now this motor component fibers, they innervate the smooth muscle. Okay, smooth muscles are present in the tunica media of the blood vessels. They are present into the wall of the viscera, say for example intestine, okay, ureter, the urinary bladder, the uterus, the fallopian tube, all are made up, all the organs are viscera. They contain the smooth muscle, not the skeletal muscle. Then there is the heart, where the cardiac muscle is present, okay, which is an exclusively present into the heart. Okay, that is also innervated by the motor component of the autonomic nerves. Okay, then there are various kind of the gland, endocrine and exocrine gland, whose secretion you are not controlling. They are also controlled by the motor component of the autonomic nervous system. Both the sympathetic and parasympathetic division, they consist of two motor neurons, okay, which conduct the impulse from central nervous system to effector organ. What does it mean? Now understand this with, when the diagram will come, I will once again tell you, but there are two neurons in sympathetic division as well as two neurons in parasympathetic motor division. We are talking of the motor components, okay? So one division, okay, is located in the central nervous system. That means it is located in the spinal cord. In last lecture we have seen that the sympathetic neurons, okay, first neuron of the pathway was located in the lateral horn, okay, of the spinal cord from T1 to L2. And in the spinal cord, parasympathetic division or first neuron preganglionic, which is called, was located from S2 to S4. And similarly, some of the cranial nerves, they also contain the parasympathetic neurons, which are preganglionic neurons or the first order neuron. Thus these neurons, which are two in number, from the central nervous system till it is supplying to the organ, okay, or viscera, okay, to the blood vessel, to the heart, there are two neurons. The first neuron in this pathway is called as preganglionic or presynaptic. Why it is called presynaptic? Because the axon of the first neuron will form a synaptic contact with the dendrites of the second motor neuron in the pathway. So it is before the synapse located, hence it is called as presynaptic or preganglionic, because most of the second order neuron or second motor neurons are located in ganglion. Okay, say for example in sympathetic ganglion, okay, or the sympathetic trunk or sympathetic chain, or it is in for the this parasympathetic, it is located, okay, in various ganglion close to the organs, okay, which we will learn in the next lecture. Okay, here we are just learning only the general aspect of the autonomic nervous system. Then the second neuron, which is in the pathway, is called as postganglionis or postsynaptic, okay, second neuron, whose axon will go out, okay, and will supply to the target organ. And target organ may be the viscera, blood vessels, or heart. Let us see here preganglionic motor neuron. The diagram is here, okay, and I will show you both preganglionic and postganglionic here. Now the cell body of the first motor neuron is located in the central nervous. Central nervous system means either it is located in the brain stem, okay, for the cranial nerve, and for the for the sympathetic it is located here into the spinal cord, and also for parasympathetic there is the S2 to the S4 segment of the spinal cord is where the first order neuron or preganglionic motor neuron is situated here. Okay, now the axon of, just trace this from lateral horn cell. Okay, the axon of this motor neuron is going through the anterior root, then it is going into the ventral rami ventral ramus, and from ventral ramus then it is going into the sympathetic uh, chain, okay, or sympathetic trunk in the ganglion, sympathetic ganglion, okay, where it will synapse with the second neuron, motor neuron, okay, that is called as the postganglionic motor neuron. Okay, now the fibers which are axons of the preganglionic neurons, they are myelinated fibers and thus looks white. And when they jump from the ventral ramus to the ganglion, sympathetic ganglion, they are called, this communication which where my pointer is here, this is called as the white rami communicantes or white ramus communicantes. Now I pass to the next slide which will show the further description of the same. Now the postganglionic motor neuron. These are located in the autonomic ganglion outside the brain and spinal cord. So this is second neuron, motor neuron. See here for sympathetic, it is a division of the autonomic nervous system. It is located in the sympathetic chain or in the sympathetic trunk where ganglions are present. But for parasympathetic, it is also located in ganglion, okay, which are associated with the various cranial nerves or which are associated with the or close to the organ in the pelvic cavity for the sacral outflow of the parasympathetic. Okay, but they are ganglion. Where, that means what was the ganglion? I told you in the last lecture, ganglion means the collection of the nerve cells outside the central nervous system. That means outside the brain and spinal cord, if there are some neurons collected in group, that is called as ganglion, right? So these are the second motor neuron, that is postganglionic motor neuron or postsynaptic motor neuron is located in the ganglion. Now the axon of the preganglionic neuron makes the synaptic contact with the postganglionic neuron, and then the axon of the postganglion, see where my pointer is moving, see this is the axon of the postganglionic neuron is moving back to the ventral rami or the ventral root, okay, and these fibers then will go for a long distance in case of sympathetic, and they will supply the smooth muscle of the viscera or blood vessel or to the exocrine and endocrine glands, and they will also, I mean say blood vessel in endocrine glands, and then it will also supply to the heart and various other visceras. Smooth muscle include everything. Visceras are the organs, okay, which they are made up of the smooth muscle, okay, which are supplied by the sympathetic or parasympathetic nerve. Okay, so these are the target organ. Now see this, the postganglionic axon which is going here back to the ventral ramus or through the dorsal ramus, it will be distributed to the target organs or viscera. They are unmyelinated or non-myelinated, and thus the communication between the sympathetic ganglion with that of the ventral ramus or the ventral root is called as the gray rami communicantes, the gray ramus communicantes. Okay, now I will move to the next slide. Now let us see here sympathetic motor neuron, preganglionic and postganglionic we have already covered, just it is a revision. So preganglionic first order neuron is that is the presynaptic neuron or uh, preganglionic neuron is located in lateral horn, which is sending it axon which is coming through the white rami communicantes to that of the sympathetic neuron, I mean say sympathetic ganglion, where thousands of the neurons are located in each ganglions and they synapse here. And then the axon of this postsynaptic ganglion will form a gray rami communicantes because these fibers are unmyelinated, and then it will go and supply to the target organ, that is the motor fibers. Okay, they are for motor activity. Let's go after you have understood the postganglion and preganglionic neurons which are present in both the divisions sympathetic and parasympathetic. Okay, let us see here. Now we come to the, after seeing the sympathetic in the previous slide, let's come to these parasympathetic motor neurons here. Okay, preganglionic and that of the postganglionic. Just see here, we are in the brain stem where the cranial nerve which are parasympathetic, some of the cranial nerve which are parasympathetic, they are taking origin. Here in this diagram, the vagus nerve, which is the 10th cranial nerve, and it has a large component, parasympathetic component here, is shown here. So in the dorsal nucleus of vagus, which is a parasympathetic nucleus, thousands of the neurons are located, out of which only one is shown, and this neuron is sending its axon here. So which was this neuron? It was the preganglionic neuron, okay, which is sending its axon here in the nerve vagus nerve, and this vagus nerve will go very close to the organ to which it supplies. This is in contrast to the fibers of sympathetic. There the postganglionic fibers were very long. Okay, here it is the preganglionic fibers are very long because from the central nervous system, that is brain or spinal cord, they have to go right up to the viscera where it is located. Then in close to the viscera, since it is a vagus nerve, it will form a plexus here, and there are the, I mean say, neuron, postganglionic neurons are located here, which will send its axon, which will supply the muscle of the heart, that is to the cardiac muscle. And these fibers are axon which are supplying to the heart. They are non-myelinated. Okay, they are non-myelinated fibers, just like in sympathetic. Okay, there is nothing like the gray and white rami communicantes because these fibers are not, okay, in the case of this cranial nerve involved in the sympathetic chain. Okay, they are supplying. So these are again in the I mean so parasympathetic. There are two motor neuron. One is preganglionic and another is the postganglionic. So the length of the postganglionic axon, which is non-myelinated or unmyelinated, is very short. This is, as I said, in contrast to the sympathetic. Okay, in contrast. Now see the sympathetic origin of the preganglionic neurons, which is located in the spinal cord in the region of S2 to S4. Okay, sacral 2 to sacral 4. Again there is a lateral horn, and then these fibers, they take origin from the preganglionic neuron. It is its axon, and it will come out through the, along with the ventral ramus. Then they will come out, and then they will go for a long distance. So the preganglionic parasympathetic fibers, which even they are taking origin from spinal cord, they are quite long, and through the splanchnic nerve it will reach right up to the organ to which it has to supply, and very close to the organ there will be ganglia, that is where the neurons of the postganglionic parasympathetic fiber will be located here, and the fibers from taking origin from these parasympathetic neurons, postganglionic, they are very short and will immediately supply to the organ. They will immediately, say for example, here it is the colon which is being supplied by the parasympathetic fibers. Okay, so these are the pre and post ganglionic fibers of parasympathetic division. Okay, we are not talking specifically about about various organ innervation or the specific point of the sympathetic and parasympathetic. We are just talking here the general arrangement of the motor neurons in sympathetic and parasympathetic. Now I move to the next slide, which will tell you the sensory. Till now we were on the motor component, which were having two neurons, okay, preganglionic and postganglionic neurons, okay, and they were supplying the motor impulses, conveying the motor impulses for the action of the organs. Now we are in the its counterpart, that is sensory component of the autonomic nervous system. Now the sensation from these areas, okay, that is from viscera, smooth muscle, okay, the heart and any other viscera which were supplied by the parasympathetic. Now this sensation of the autonomic, the system, okay, are transmitted from viscera to the central nervous system through the somatic sensory fibers, okay, through the somatic sensory fibers. That means there is no autonomic sensory fibers, okay, there is no separate division of the fibers which will carry the sensation from these viscera which were supplied by the motor fibers of the autonomic system. It is the same fibers, okay, which will take origin and will carry the sensation from the viscera, and so it will reach to the spinal cord, and there is only one neuron similar to the somatic. It is one neuron involved in this. The cell body of the sensory neurons, similar to that of somatic, are located in the dorsal root ganglion of the spinal nerve, which we have already learned, and sensory ganglion of some cranial, because the parasympathetic component is also here, which is coming from the brain, but this ganglion is located within the cranial nerves. Now, instead of the dorsal root ganglion, which is only associated with the spinal nerve, okay, this somatic, I mean say this ganglion with the I mean say with that of the cranial nerves are associated within the cranial nerves, okay, they lie within the cranial nerve pathway. Now they conduct the visceral pain. Okay, what sensation they are carrying from viscera? They conduct the visceral pain impulses. That is the most important, which sometimes reaches to our level of consciousness. Okay, they carry also the sensation for forming the autonomic reflex arc or impulses and play a role in the regulation of the autonomic function. Okay, so without sensation which are carried through the viscera, a autonomic nervous system will not be able to function properly. So sensory input from these viscera are very necessary. Okay. Now this was the sensory component of the autonomic nervous system. Now, visceral sensation, as I told you in last lectures also, they rarely reach to our level of consciousness. You become aware about your viscera only when they are paining, and when they will pain, when they are stressed, okay. So the say for the pain in the abdomen, okay, is because of the stretching of the wall of the intestine, okay, or the stomach, and they rarely you get it, okay. During the, as I said you, during the heart attack in layman terms, okay, the severe pain originates from the heart, okay. Only during this occasional movement, okay, one person feels the sensation from the viscera. Otherwise this sensation, they don't reach to our level of consciousness. It doesn't mean that sensation are not going, they are going to the brain, okay, but we are not aware about this sensation. Now we go to the last slide, which will tell you the operant component of sympathetic and parasympathetic. Let us see the operant component of sympathetic. All these sensations in blue line which are shown here, they are sensory component, are the sensation going through the ventral and dorsal ramus, and then they go to the trunk, and then they go into the dorsal spinal root. Okay, and here is the neuron located, what is called as the sensory neuron in the dorsal root ganglion. This is pseudo unipolar neuron. This Till this neuron, it was the peripheral process, which was long and which resembles to the dendrite of any neuron. Okay, and then there is a short central process which will end into the neuron, sensory neurons located in the dorsal horn cell, on say dorsal horns. Okay, and then sometime it may also act onto the directly onto the motor sympathetic neuron, either directly or through interneurons, to form a reflex arc. Okay, if you don't know about reflex arc, don't bother, just remember it. Okay, we will explain you later when we will teach you the central nervous system, okay, in detail, right? So this was an operant component of the sympathetic nervous system. Let us see the operant component of the parasympathetic nervous system. Here see again the blue line going from heart, it is carrying the sensation from heart. Again this is a ganglia which is close to the brain, and this ganglia is located within the nerve, that is the vagus nerve. It is the 10th cranial nerve, vagus. So this sensory ganglia is located within, and here the peripheral process of this sensory cell will end into the sensory nucleus, a dorsal nucleus of the vagus. Okay, dorsal nucleus of the vagus. So sensation are going right up to the vagus nerve. This lecture was just a general introduction and arrangement of the motor and sensory component of the autonomic nervous system. The next lecture will be in detail, somewhat detailed, since these are the lectures of the general anatomy. We are not going into the details. This will explain what are the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. Thank you very much.